Good morning, and thank you very much, Bruce, for that generous introduction. I'm delighted to be here, and I have to tell you, speaking of momentous change, I just wonder what has happened between the time I left home and arrived here. So this promises to be a year of momentous challenge and change, possibly change, in the relationship between the United States and China. And today I'm particularly talking about the economic side of that relationship, and a relationship that I believe is the most consequential bilateral relationship in the world. Now, it's obvious, to state the obvious, on the U.S. side, the change is the election of President Trump. And on the Chinese side, Chen Li will tell you what changes are going to emanate from the 19th Communist Party Congress in the fall. But first, to think back for a minute about the Sino-U.S. economic relationship. It has grown exponentially since 1979 through both Democratic and Republican administrations. From a modest beginning, two-way trade is well over $500 billion. And I'm proud to have played a role in restarting that economic relationship when President Bush sent me, after he lost the election in 1992, to both remove a ban on government-to-government contact, but also to restart the U.S.-China Joint Commission on Commerce and Trade, JCCT, getting the economic relationship started again after a rather moribund few years. And now, of course, I think we all know that China is the third largest market for U.S. products and services, a $400 billion market that many think should be even larger. And according to a new study prepared for the U.S.-China Business Council by Oxford Economics, the trade relationship, two-way trade relationship, supports roughly 2.6 million American jobs. Now, turning to President Trump, who as a candidate said a lot of things about China. He pointed to the trade deficit, more than $300 billion in China's favor, and he says that's a drag on U.S. GDP growth. He said the U.S. has lost millions of jobs to China. He said China engages in unfair trade practices and currency manipulation and has threatened new tariffs on Chinese products. I'm sure we've all seen all of that stuff. 45% is one of the figures that was mentioned. In other words, he is calling for a rebalance in the U.S.-China trade relationship. Now, concurrently, I am fascinated and encouraged by President Xi Jinping's recent speech, particularly the one at the World Economic Forum in Davos, where he lauded, quote, economic globalization and free trade and investment. He had some wonderfully poetic language in that speech. It's an absolute masterpiece. And the quote I particularly liked is this one. Pursuing protectionism is just like locking oneself in a dark room. While wind and rain may be kept outside, so are light and air. Wonderful quote. Now, the U.S. business community has also applauded President Xi's comprehensive agenda for economic reform that was put forth at the 18th Communist Party Congress in 2013. Yet so far, we don't see too much specific progress. A key question here, do both leaders mean what they say? Now, I'm not going to pretend to read the mind of either one. I'm going to leave the Chinese side to Chen Li, but I am going to comment about President Trump, based not on reading his mind, but based on what I'm seeing, hearing, and watching him do so far. And what I also know from decades of participation in the political process here is that campaign rhetoric often dies down and disappears once the reality of actually having to govern sets in for a new president. This time, however, I think something is different. When he was President Trump gave voice to the frustration and anger felt by millions of Americans who felt let down by the ruling establishments of both political parties. And they elected him because I think they thought he was serious about making the changes he advocated. And his inaugural address last week underscored what he had been saying in the campaign. And I would note that at one point in that address, he said forcefully, "I will not let you down." So what I think is different this time is the sheer determination with which President Trump, his cabinet, and advisors will pursue the changes he campaigned about. And change in trade relationships was one big issue, and of course that includes the rebalance with China. And we can see already what he's been doing, talking about renegotiating NAFTA and then pulling us out of the TPP just yesterday by executive order. The further evidence to support the determination I believe I see is the appointments he has made and the views that those people have expressed. Now, Commerce Secretary Wilbur Ross, for one, and I know you here at Brookings know him since he has been a trustee for some time. He is to have a big role in trade policy, and he's been quite outspoken about the things he believes China isn't doing properly. And if anyone has read the transcript or watched his confirmation hearing, you will have seen and heard a lot of those comments. There's Bob Lighthizer, who will be the trade representative. He also has an outspoken point of view on some of these trade activities, particularly enforcement. And then there is Peter Navarro, who heads this National Trade Council in the White House. Now, that is a new animal, and we'll have to see just how that works. But he, too, has spoken and written very candidly about China and is very hawkish. And this is going back some years. And if we look at the white paper that Wilbur Ross and Peter Navarro authored during the campaign, their concerns about China and where this relationship should move in the forward, I think is really quite clear.